The NPR Politics Podcast is a flagship program from National Public Radio (NPR) that offers in-depth analysis and discussion on the latest news events related to Washington, D.C. and the U.S. political campaign trail. Known for its accessible yet nuanced approach, the podcast has become a go-to resource for listeners seeking to understand the complexities of American politics. Produced multiple times a week, it features a rotating cast of NPR seasoned political correspondents, editors, and reporters who break down significant developments in U.S. governance, policy, elections, and political culture. This comprehensive exploration will delve into the podcast's format, content, contributors, notable episodes, its role in political discourse, and its relevance in covering Washington and the campaign trail, while incorporating insights from recent episodes and broader political trends. Overview of the NPR Politics Podcast format and structure. The NPR Politics Podcast is typically released several times a week, with episodes ranging from 15 to 30 minutes, though special episodes or roundups may run longer. The podcast is structured as a roundtable discussion hosted by a lead correspondent and featuring a panel of NPR journalists who bring expertise in areas such as White House reporting, congressional affairs, voting rights, national security, and campaign dynamics. The tone is conversational yet professional, aiming to inform without overwhelming listeners with jargon. Episodes often begin with a brief introduction to the day's topic, followed by a detailed discussion that blends reporting, analysis, and occasional humor to make complex political issues accessible. The podcast is produced by a dedicated team, including producers like Bria Suggs and Kelly Wessinger, and edited by professionals such as Casey Morell, with Mathoni Muturi serving as the executive producer. Listeners can access episodes for free on NPR's website, major podcast platforms, or through the NPR Politics Podcast Plus subscription, which offers sponsor-free episodes and bonus content at plus.npr.org/politics. Focus. The podcast's primary focus is on Washington, D.C. politics, covering the White House, Congress, federal agencies, and the judiciary, while also tracking developments on the U.S. political campaign trail. It explores legislative battles, executive actions, judicial rulings, and electoral strategies, often contextualizing these events within broader historical, cultural, and social frameworks. The podcast avoids sensationalism, prioritizing fact-based reporting and analysis over partisan rhetoric, which distinguishes it from more polarized media outlets. Audience and reach. The NPR Politics Podcast appeals to a broad audience, from politically engaged citizens to casual listeners seeking to understand current events. Its accessibility makes it suitable for those new to political analysis, while its depth satisfies seasoned observers. The podcast's availability on multiple platforms, including NPR's website, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the NPR app, ensures wide reach. The NPR Politics Podcast Plus subscription enhances its appeal by offering exclusive content reflecting NPR's commitment to public media funding. Key themes and coverage. The NPR Politics Podcast covers a wide range of topics, reflecting the multifaceted nature of U.S. politics. Below are some of the key themes it addresses, with examples drawn from recent episodes to illustrate its approach to Washington and campaign trail coverage. Point 1. Executive actions and White House policies. The podcast frequently examines the actions of the president and the administration, analyzing executive orders, policy initiatives, and their implications. For instance, a June 3, 2025 episode titled "Why is Trump Attacking Law Firms?" explored President Donald Trump's executive orders targeting certain law firms, restricting their business endeavors. The discussion, featuring voting correspondent Miles Parks, national justice correspondent Carrie Johnson, and senior political editor Domenico Montanaro, examined why some firms settled while others fought back, and whether these orders raised legal questions, especially after some were struck down in court. The episode highlighted Trump's rally in Pittsburgh on May 30, 2025, as a backdrop for his policy announcements, underscoring the intersection of campaign trail optics and governance. Similarly, an April 23, 2025 episode, How the Culture Wars Influenced Trump's First 100 Days, analyzed Trump's executive actions targeting gender ideology, military wokeness, and DI programs. The episode, with contributions from Tamara Keith, Sarah McCammon, and Domenico Montanaro, noted that Trump's policies mirrored his campaign promises, such as an executive order barring transgender female athletes from women's sports. Signed on February 5, 2025. This coverage illustrates how the podcast connects campaign rhetoric to policy outcomes, offering listeners a clear narrative arc from the trail to the White House. 2. Congressional dynamics and legislative priorities. Congress is a central focus, with episodes dissecting legislative battles, budget negotiations, and the balance of power. A May 6, 2025 episode, It's Budget Season. Can the White House and Congress find common ground? Explored Trump's call for a single, comprehensive spending bill, contrasted with Congress's differing priorities. Featuring Susan Davis, Deirdre Walsh, and Tamara Keith. The episode analyzed the challenges of bipartisan cooperation in a Republican-controlled Congress, especially after the January 6, 2025, certification of Trump's electoral victory. This episode also referenced the 2021 Capitol insurrection, noting changes to the certification process to prevent future disruptions, highlighting the podcast's knack for connecting current events to historical context. Another episode aired on May 20, 2025, titled Why GOP-led States Are Passing New Restrictions for Ballot Initiatives, examined efforts in Republican-led states to limit ballot initiatives, a tool for voters to bypass legislatures. With contributions from Miles Parks, Ashley Lopez, and Mara Liasson, the episode explored how these restrictions could affect voter influence, particularly in battleground states, tying congressional actions to campaign trail dynamics. Point 3. The Campaign Trail and Electoral Politics. The podcast's coverage of the U.S. political campaign trail is particularly robust during election seasons, but it remains relevant year-round as it tracks candidate strategies, voter trends, and electoral reforms. An October 30, 2024 episode, What Early Voting Can and Cannot Tell Us About the Election, featured Ashley Lopez, Miles Parks, and Stephen Fowler discussing the complexities of interpreting early voting data in the 2024 presidential election. The episode highlighted changes in voting systems since 2020, particularly in battleground states like Arizona and Nevada, where voters were set to decide on election reforms. This focus on voter behavior and electoral mechanics underscores the podcast's commitment to demystifying the campaign process. An earlier episode from August 24, 2024, covered Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s endorsement of Donald Trump after suspending his presidential campaign. Featuring Sarah McCammon, Stephen Fowler, and Domenico Montanaro, the episode analyzed how RFK Jr.'s decision could influence voter perceptions, particularly among Democrats, framing Trump's beliefs as fringe. This discussion exemplifies the podcast's ability to connect third-party campaigns to broader electoral dynamics. The podcast also covered Kamala Harris's 2024 campaign, with episodes like How Kamala Harris Incorporates Her Biography into Her Campaign Message, September 24, 2024, and Vice President Harris Has Rebooted the Electoral Map, August 2, 2024. These episodes, featuring correspondents like Deepa Shivram, Tamara Keith, and Stephen Fowler, explored Harris's strategy of weaving her identity as a Black and South Asian woman into her campaign without making it the centerpiece, and how her candidacy shifted voter coalitions in Sun Belt swing states. The podcast's analysis of Harris's concession speech on November 6, 2024, further highlighted the challenges she faced in differentiating herself from President Joe Biden, whose unpopularity impacted her campaign. Point 4. International relations and national security. While primarily focused on domestic politics, the podcast occasionally covers international relations when they intersect with Washington's agenda. A May 8, 2025 episode, How Trump is Reshaping U.S.-Canada Relations, discussed Trump's meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, noting strained relations between the two allies. Featuring Susan Davis, Tamara Keith, and Jackie Northam, the episode analyzed how Trump's foreign policy decisions reverberated domestically, particularly in trade and border policies, which were key campaign trail issues. Another episode from December 13, 2024, Why Some in Congress Are Skeptical of Trump's National Intelligence Pick, examined Tulsi Gabbard's nomination as Director of National Intelligence. With Susan Davis, Greg Meyer, and Claudia Grisales, the podcast explored Gabbard's controversial foreign policy views and her shift from Democrat to Republican, reflecting on how such appointments shape Washington's national security landscape. Point 5. Social and cultural issues. The podcast frequently addresses how social and cultural issues intersect with politics. The April 23, 2025, episode on culture wars mentioned earlier analyzed Trump's policies on gender, DEI, and military culture, showing how campaign promises translated into governance. Similarly, a March 12, 2025, episode, Who is Mahmoud Khalil, the protester the Trump admin wants to deport, discussed the Trump administration's crackdown on pro-Palestinian campus protests, focusing on the case of Mahmoud Khalil, a lawful permanent resident taken into ICE custody, featuring Susan Davis, Jimena Bustillo, and Mara Liasson. The episode highlighted the tension between free speech and immigration policy, a recurring theme in political discourse. Point 6. Tributes and historical reflections. The podcast occasionally steps back to reflect on historical figures and events. A January 10, 2025, episode, Washington Honors Jimmy Carter, covered the former president's funeral at Washington's National Cathedral, attended by all 5 living presidents. With Asma Khalid, Domenico Montanaro, and Mara Liasson, the episode explored Carter's legacy and Biden's eulogy, offering a moment of bipartisan reflection amidst a polarized political climate. Similarly, a December 23, 2024, episode, The Evolutions of Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, traced Biden's career and its reflection of Democratic shifts, providing historical context for current political trends. Key contributors and their roles. The NPR Politics podcast benefits from a talented roster of journalists, each bringing specialized expertise. Susan Davis, political correspondent covering Congress and campaigns, often providing insights into legislative dynamics and candidate strategies. Tamara Keith, senior White House correspondent, offering detailed reporting on presidential actions and campaign trail developments. Domenico Montanaro, senior political editor and correspondent, known for his analytical depth on electoral trends and political strategy. Sarah McCammon, national political correspondent, focusing on cultural and social issues intersecting with politics. Miles Parks, voting correspondent, specializing in election integrity and voter access. Ashley Lopez, voting correspondent, covering electoral reforms and voter behavior. Mara Liasson, senior national political correspondent, providing historical context and long-term analysis. Asma Khalid, White House correspondent, often focusing on campaign trail dynamics and voter demographics. Stephen Fowler, political reporter specializing in campaign strategies and swing states. Claudia Grisales, congressional correspondent covering legislative battles and Capitol Hill dynamics. These contributors, among others, ensure the podcast offers diverse perspectives, grounded in rigorous reporting and first-hand access to Washington's political machinery. Notable episodes and their impact. Below are summaries of notable episodes from 2024 and 2025, illustrating the podcast's range and depth. June 3, 2025. Why is Trump attacking law firms? Focus: Trump's executive orders targeting law firms and their legal challenges. Significance: highlighted the intersection of executive power and judicial oversight with implications for campaign promises on deregulation. Contributors: Miles Parks, Kerry Johnson, Domenico Montanaro. Impact: provided clarity on a niche but consequential policy move, showing how campaign rhetoric translates into governance. May 20, 2025. Why GOP-led states are passing new restrictions for ballot initiatives. Focus: efforts to limit ballot initiatives in Republican-led states. Significance: explored voter suppression concerns and their impact on future elections, a key issue for the campaign trail. Contributors: Miles Parks, Ashley Lopez, Mara Liasson. Impact: informed listeners about electoral reforms relevant for understanding state-level political strategies. April 23, 2025. How the culture wars influenced Trump's first 100 days. Focus: Trump's cultural policy initiatives, including bans on transgender athletes and DI programs. Significance: connected campaign promises to policy outcomes, analyzing their societal impact. Contributors: Tamara Keith, Sarah McCammon, Domenico Montanaro. Impact: offered a framework for understanding how cultural issues shape political agendas. November 8, 2024. Harris didn't differentiate herself from deeply unpopular Biden focus, Kamala Harris's concession and the challenges of her 2024 campaign. Significance provided a postmortem on the Democratic campaign, highlighting strategic missteps. Contributors Susan Davis, Sarah McCammon, Deepa Shivram. Impact helped listeners process the 2024 election outcome and its implications for future Democratic strategies. August 24, 2024, Robert F. Kennedy endorses Donald Trump focus, RFK Jr.'s campaign suspension and endorsement of Trump. Significance, analyzed third-party influence on the presidential race, a recurring theme in U.S. elections. Contributors, Sarah McCammon, Stephen Fowler, Domenico Montanaro. Impact, clarified the electoral implications of third-party candidates relevant for understanding voter dynamics. Role in political discourse. The NPR Politics podcast plays a vital role in shaping public understanding of U.S. politics by offering balanced, fact-based analysis. Unlike partisan outlets, it strives for neutrality, presenting multiple perspectives while grounding discussions in verifiable data and reporting. This approach is particularly valuable in a polarized media landscape where misinformation and sensationalism often dominate. Educational value. The podcast serves as an educational tool, breaking down complex issues like electoral college certification, executive orders, and voter suppression tactics in a way that's digestible for a general audience. Its focus on context, whether historical, legal, or cultural, helps listeners understand not just what's happening but why it matters, countering misinformation. By relying on NPR's rigorous journalistic standards, the podcast counters misinformation prevalent on platforms like X, where trending topics can amplify unverified claims. For example, while X trends might highlight controversial issues like Tesla's FSD crash or documentary credibility, the podcast sticks to sourced reporting, avoiding speculative narratives, engaging diverse audiences. The podcast's diverse contributor pool ensures representation of various perspectives, from voting rights to international affairs. Its coverage of issues like Kamala Harris's identity or GOP ballot restrictions appeals to listeners across political and demographic lines, fostering inclusive dialogue. Relevance to Washington and the campaign trail. The NPR Politics podcast is uniquely positioned to cover Washington and the campaign trail due to its access to insider reporting and its focus on both immediate events and long-term trends. In Washington, it provides granular insights into White House decisions, congressional negotiations, and judicial rulings as seen in episodes on Trump's law firm orders and budget talks. On the campaign trail, it tracks candidate strategies, voter behavior, and electoral reforms, offering a comprehensive view of the political process. The podcast's relevance is enhanced by its timeliness, with episodes often released within hours of major events, such as Trump's meetings with foreign leaders or Congress's electoral certification. Its ability to connect campaign promises to policy outcomes, e.g., Trump's culture war policies or Harris's electoral map reboot, makes it a critical resource for understanding the interplay between campaigning and governing. Challenges and criticisms. While widely respected, the NPR Politics podcast faces challenges in a crowded media landscape. Balancing depth and accessibility. The podcast's concise format can sometimes limit in-depth exploration of complex issues, though bonus episodes for subscribers mitigate this. Perceived bias. Some critics, particularly on platforms like X, argue that NPR leans left, though the podcast's commitment to neutrality counters this perception through balanced reporting. Competition. With countless political podcasts available, NPR must compete with both mainstream and niche shows, relying on its reputation and journalistic rigor to stand out. Conclusion. The NPR Politics podcast is an indispensable resource for anyone seeking to understand the latest news events in Washington and the U.S. political campaign trail. Through its expert contributors, fact-based analysis, and accessible format, it demystifies complex political developments from executive orders to electoral reforms. Recent episodes, such as those covering Trump's policies, Harris's campaign, and congressional dynamics, demonstrate its ability to connect immediate events to broader trends. By maintaining journalistic integrity and engaging diverse audiences, the podcast not only informs but also fosters a more informed public discourse. As U.S. politics continues to evolve, the NPR Politics podcast remains a trusted guide, offering clarity and context in an often chaotic political landscape.